Welcome back to the Foreign Desk. I am Lisa Daftari. Thank you for joining us once again this evening for our Foreign Policy Power panel. We have for you tonight two extremely brilliant guests who are foremost in their fields in foreign policy. We hope to have a thorough and interesting and informative conversation for you tonight. Without further ado, I'd like to bring in our two guests. We have with us again Mr. Bijan Kian, twice confirmed by the Senate, served 3 consecutive administrations, reporting directly to Presidents Bush and Obama, serving as deputy lead on the landing team for the Office of Director of National Intelligence for President Trump. He reads and writes and speaks on everything, including global economy and foreign policy and national security. And most recently, he now serves as the president of the Institute for Voices of Liberty. And we will talk more about that organization in a little bit. And of course, Michael Pregent, a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, former intelligence officer with over 30 years experience, working in security, terrorism, counterinsurgency, policy issues, numerous publications, ISIS, the Quds Force, Syria, Iraq. He writes for the Washington Post, Foreign Affairs, Wall Street Journal, Foreign Policy Magazine. He's a good friend and an expert analyst on TV, Fox News, CNN, BBC, and I welcome you both to the program tonight.
It's an honor to be on this panel. Thanks for having me, especially it's good to see you again, Bijan. Good to see you again, Lisa, remotely, but it's still good to be here.
Of course, and
delighted to be with you, Lisa, and Michael. Good to be with you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, Bijan. You're a wonderful guest, and by popular demand, we keep bringing you back and bothering you even when you have emergency plumbing issues at home. We thank you for joining us tonight. You both are witnessing.
Seems like we have plumbing issues in our country.
Perfect segue. I like that. Speaking of which, we are almost 2 weeks into the Biden administration. We are in that, and I make the joke on my podcast about how we're 2 weeks in calendar years. We are 14 weeks in dog years. And if we're counting executive order years, we're about maybe half a century into the Biden administration. Almost 36 executive orders so far, many of them touching upon important foreign policy issues. Quick overturn of Trump-era policies with regards to immigration, with regards to reinstating Palestinian aid, with regards to COVID, of course, with regards to reversing travel restrictions from enemy states, and joining, of course, the acronymed global clubs where we pay to do nothing. But at the same time, we have challenges that continue from Iran, North Korea, Afghanistan, China, Russia. Michael, I want to start with you. You do some very important work in some of the areas that I just mentioned. Sitting back and watching the last 2 weeks or so, what did you think about these executive orders that were signed? Was there any one in particular that stood out? And given our current political climate, do you think that there is any one issue that is being overturned from the Trump era that will be the most precarious for us going forward?
Well, there are a lot of executive orders that Biden has signed. I think I was almost at the count is over 33 at this point. And as a foreign policy, where my focus is on the Middle East and other places, not to mention what Russia, China, and other countries are doing in the Middle East, it seems that some of these executive orders actually benefit them. Specifically, executive orders halting American oil production, American oil rights, leasing lands to people. It's actually putting some Democrat voters in opposition to what President Biden is doing, because it's actually hurting Native Americans in these states where the Alaska pipeline goes through, and it's hurting New Mexico in particular, which voted for Biden as well. Right. But if you look at the WHO, you look at the Paris Climate Accords, you look at, reviewing weapons deals with our Sunni regional allies in the Middle East, all of these things seem to result in either Putin or all three of them, Putin, Z, and Khomeini, all smiling based on what they're seeing so far. And the one thing that Biden said he was going to do is probably going to be the most difficult, and that is rejoining the Iran deal, because it was really just that bad that there's really not an appetite in Washington, D.C. to simply re-enter a deal that is set to expire in 8 to 10 years without renegotiating everything.
Right. Right. And Bijan, I wanted to turn to you for this particular reason. You have a very unique combination of perspectives. Obviously, as an Iranian American who understands the nuances of the Middle East, particularly in Iran, particularly in the last 40 years since the Iranian Revolution, you understand the government, how it works. You also served under President Obama and Trump. And it seems like,
And
people
President Bush.
and President Bush. But with regards to the Iran deal, many people say, of course, Biden didn't campaign on much, but he did campaign on getting back into the Iran deal. And many say, well, he will just follow the handbook under which President Obama joined the Iran deal. But if we look back, President Obama gave the Iranians a very easy deal, sunset clause, no mention of terror spending, no mention of human rights. He made it quite easy. But as we all know, the realities have changed since those days. What challenges, if any, will the Biden administration face in that change? Will the calculus now change for them to that easily re-enter into an Iran deal?
Well, before I get into answering your question, I want to thank you for mentioning the volunteer role that I have at the Institute for Voices of Liberty, and I want to thank you both, Michael, for so graciously agreeing to serve on the board of advisors, the advisory council of the Institute, and yourself on the board of trustees. We appreciate the support. We're in a fight, and we could use all the help we can get. We're very grateful, and as a volunteer, I am conveying the gratitude of my colleagues to both of you. Now, with respect to President Biden, I wrote a letter to President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris saying, I didn't vote for you. I don't like your policies, but you are my president and vice president. As an American, I beg you, please look at the long-term interest of the United States and also the people of Iran, who are the best peace partners of the United States. History has shown it. And not so much about the Islamic Republic and political expediency. I wrote that, and I meant it, every word of it, sincerely. I wish President Biden and this administration good luck. I want them to be successful. I'm an American. He's my president. Kamala Harris is my vice president. Whether I like their policies or not, I want the best for America, and I want them to be successful. But Lisa and Michael, let me just be brutally honest with you. I don't see that. I don't see that success happening at all, because while I should not be presumptuous, I could imagine professionals at the National Security Council, and there are many professionals there, are sitting back, scratching their heads, and wondering at the tension that this administration is facing. That tension comes from, do we please a certain segment of the Democratic Party that wishes to have a different America, a completely different America? Do I have to name them? Cancel culture, this, that, the other, all the things, rewriting history, reprogramming people who supported President Trump, punishing a desire. I don't know if it's true or not, but if it's true, it's very sad. Punishing Trump supporters, and then looking at all the action in a few days that the new president and his team have been in the White House and other agencies, looking at his message of unity. I read a letter to the editor at Wall Street Journal today that says, if he's trying to unite us, I don't see any sign of it. And I tend to agree with that. I look at the action so far, and I believe those professionals are scratching their heads at the National Security Council are also putting their heads down and wondering, what is political expediency doing to our country and what's taking place? This call for unity, history tells us, be careful. When leaders call for unity, Make sure you understand what that means. That word "we" is uttered so strongly, and it reminds us in the history of some things that we don't want to be reminded of. I won't get into it, but all in all, you talk about the position of this government. This administration has many challenges ahead of it. It cannot be successful without first uniting America. That's a very big goal. And when it comes to Iran, I think we are, as a country, we're suffering from a poverty of knowledge of the culture. Political scientists tell me governments don't have a nature. Well, they need to be reminded that this is a 1400-year-old ideology, not a government. State Department tells us, hey, we don't negotiate with people, we negotiate with government. Yes, but take a look at the legitimacy of the government. This is the same government the State Department, has put it on top of the state sponsors of terrorism.
Right.
And you say we negotiate with the government, not the people. There's something wrong with that picture. I think the history of foreign policy of the United States over the past 40-some years can be divided in 40 years and 4 years. And when you compare what was accomplished in 4 years, and I'm not sitting here trying to be an advocate for this party or this candidate or that candidate. That's a separate work, not here. I'm here to tell you the truth as I know it, as it my justified belief that in 4 years, for those who say Trump policies did nothing to the Islamic Republic, they need to look a little closer. The Islamic Republic is bankrupt. Not only their institutions are bankrupt and corrupt, but also its bank account is empty. I don't know if they really don't have the money or they have been delinquent in paying their United Nations dues.
Right.
So these 4 years have been effective. Change is a process. I hope Michael agrees with me that change is not focused on just an event. We're not looking for, the government of Islamic Republic. I call them Islamist Republic in Iran, just to make myself feel better. But they, to expect them to be overthrown or go away or just disappear into the sunset in one evening, I don't know. It took Soviet Union some time to come to that, point. And we know that the policies of the past 4 years have brought the Islamic Republic in Iran to the zenith of its weakness. And we know that for sure. I like to believe that professionals, Tony Blinken, Jake Sullivan, Wendy Sherman, they all focus on how they can leverage the gains of policies by Trump administration and think about what's good for America in the long run, as opposed to what's good for the party or the next election or political expediency. And that is my belief. I believe these professionals will think that way. I'm not going to presume that they're not going to do that. We'll sit back and watch, but we will watch carefully. And a lot of voices who are going to be very loud, reminding the administration what America needs to do in the sake of America, for the sake of America.
Yeah. To that end, meanwhile, in the short period of time that we knew that the mullahs were hoping that the Biden administration gets into the White House. They were putting it out in state-sponsored media, all over Twitter, which they have a platform on, Michael. What's the weakness that is apparent in this administration? Not just doing this about face. What was it in the minds of the Iranian regime that they are now calling the shots 2 weeks into this administration? They're the ones calling the shots. They have given President Biden an ultimatum. He has a deadline of February 21st, just like the Europeans, to get back into the deal, to remove the sanctions. I mean, they bring the preconditions to the table, not the other way around. And you're thinking to yourself, how did we get here? And I'm going to read this quote. If the new administration does not meet its obligations, remove sanctions in short order, it will destroy the possibility for engagement within the nuclear agreement. And that is a quote from Iran's ambassador to the United Nations, written in the New York Times, using our media platforms to communicate their threats to us. I mean, how did we get here?
Well, we got here because the JCPOA was a very weak deal. And Wendy Sherman, Jake Sullivan, Tony Blinken, Brett McGurk, and all of those that kind of worked to get us here, John Kerry, President Obama, and Biden, should they have a second chance now to get it right. They saw that the JCPOA embarrassed them on a daily basis since 2015 with the capture of 12 Navy sailors, with building militias to deploy to Syria, creating new militias in Iraq, and increasing the lethal capability of Ansar Allah in Yemen, the Houthis. But back to Bijan's point, is that there shouldn't be a Democrat foreign policy and a Republican foreign policy. There should be a U.S. foreign policy.
Right.
Our adversaries shouldn't hope for election outcomes that favor them. And we saw endorsements by Lebanese Hezbollah, Rob Malley, endorsements by lobbying groups tied to Tehran for Rob Malley. If your adversary is happy you are now part of the foreign policy team,
right,
I can't think of a greater offense. I can't think of a greater offense than to think an American will choose your position over the best interests and the long-term strategies and interests of the United States.
Well, why aren't they fazed by this? You're absolutely right.
They're in denial because they're in denial. You know DC. How do you survive DC? Groupthink. You think the same. They're talking to themselves. In the military, we call it a self-licking ice cream cone. They're not being challenged. They're not being debated. And back to the free speech part of this whole thing. The debate is now being canceled. If you disagree with the Biden administration, you are somehow a tacit supporter of the insurrection, in quotations. Our adversaries couldn't be happier. They have a very weak administration in office. And I only say that not because this is an anti-Biden. It's a 50-50 Senate. The House has never been closer than it is now. Nancy Pelosi doesn't have the leadership she's had in the past. And if Biden simply turned to Manchin, Senators Manchin, Cardin, Menendez, and Schumer, and let them craft the JCPOA, we could make this a treaty. Because all four of those senators, those Democrat senators, want to end sunset clauses, want to address ballistic missiles, want to address regional behavior, and all four of them voted against the Iran deal. In my previous life as director of Veterans Against the Iran deal, we got Cardin and Manchin to vote against it because of Annex 2. And Annex 2, you know, the Obama administration used to say the Iran deal has nothing to do with regional behavior, but Annex 2 empowered malign regional behavior. It empowered Qasem Soleimani. It freed up assets. It delisted banks, ships, terrorist organizations, and it basically ignited a capability that Soleimani didn't have. They were able to shore up Assad with it. They were able to invite Putin into Syria because of it. And this is an opportunity for the Biden administration to get it right. And I think something we saw with the Iran deal, Bijan, you'll remember this, is the Obama administration was so afraid of doing anything in Syria because they thought it would derail the Iran deal. They were afraid of doing anything in Iraq because it would derail the Iran deal. And now we're seeing the halt of weapon sales to Saudi Arabia while the Biden administration is reviewing those agreements, and also the F-35 program that I'm sure we're going to talk about later. But you're going to start seeing the administration based on who's in it. I mean, Rob Malley, if the Biden team viewed the Iranians as bad as they viewed Trump voters, we would get a great deal. Because they would be really
okay, perfectly. Yes, you nailed it. But why? I mean, I remember for 8 years under the Obama administration, we would say the same thing. But why? Why is there such a reluctance to evidence and say they are sponsoring terror? We have, even the UN came out and said they're supporting the Houthis. Why?
In 2007 and 2008, you couldn't find a Democrat that would support the Islamic Republic of Iran. Obama came in and said, let's do everything differently than George Bush. And it was a George Costanza moment on Seinfeld, where George does the opposite of what he's supposed to do. And that gave us the Iran deal. It was like, who hates Al-Qaeda as much as we do? Iran does. So let's tilt towards Iran. It was that simple. It was a trade-off, and the Obama administration even said, Obama said this, you want to restore balance in the Middle East between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Why would you restore balance between an ally, the guardians of Mecca and Medina, and the Islamic Republic of Iran that holds its own people hostage to draconian laws and repercussions for simply wanting to listen to music or wanting to protest or wanting to be gay or wanting to practice another religion? Anyway.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And I think an added angle to all of this, since the Obama days, are the people of the Middle East. I think that the Biden administration will have to trample a lot of the people in the Middle East, and obviously, first and foremost, the people of Iran, in order to get a deal. Now, add to that, now the people of Iran have newfound friends and allies in the UAE, in Israel, in Bahrain, in Morocco, in the long list of nations that are now, becoming more moderate and have switched, or at least repositioned themselves to say, we want to be part of the future of the Middle East. That doesn't have to do with terror, or, we want to separate ourselves from the mullahs of Iran, and we want to have a future of the Middle East. Now, Bijan, how has all of this affected the people of Iran and how they view their future? How have they reacted to the departure of Donald Trump, someone who, surprisingly, many people don't know this, the Iranian people, for the most part, majority of whom, and I'm grossly generalizing here, but Bijan will hopefully back me up on this, supported Donald Trump and his pressure campaign. How are they viewing the departure of Donald Trump and a Biden administration that will most likely, again, ignore the grievances of the people and move forward with their own agenda?
I'll answer that, but let me just say how much I appreciate listening to Michael, a voice of authority and experience. He's seen it. He's not reading books. He was there. I know where he was. In some of the areas that he traveled, I did too. I understand. I know what the Islamic Republic was doing in the region. And he talked about agreements, and he talked about senators like Manchin and Menendez and their position. And he's right. If this thing is not a treaty, then it can be, torn apart very easily and violated. It has to be a treaty, and Senate must approve it if they go into the deal. So I want to say that. But talking about agreements, JCPOA was more a press release, as we've said it repeatedly, than an agreement. It was never signed. It was never ratified by Parliament. It cannot be considered a treaty. And as such, it is not under the international norms of what's called treaties and the characteristic of that. But there was something else. And I like to say this on this program with you and Michael. I challenge President Biden's government administration to please disclose all 17 signed agreements that were signed with JCPOA. They were signed. These letters were signed. Right. And when people ask the question, well, can we see them? They say, well, they're not classified. Well, if they're not classified, just let the public know what's in them. Let the public know and read and understand for themselves why this deal was a bad deal. Not because of its very loosey-goosey kind of a, we wish for you to do this and it would be desirable to do that. No specific binding language in that so-called agreement. I hesitate to call it agreement. I'm not a lawyer, but I know the difference between a treaty and agreement and just a press release. So just release those documents, 17 of them. Let people see. Now, to come back to your particular question, the support that people of Iran showed for President Trump. First of all, let me just preface this by saying it's my personal belief that the right and the responsibility to choose or change their government belongs solely to the people of Iran. They should not be looking to an outside force to come in and make things right for them. That is not right. It will not happen. And it's just something that's unreasonable. However, much to my own disappointment, that is exactly the sentiment. They saw after 40 years, a government where a representative of the United States government got behind the podium and said, I'll put you on notice. Those few words meant a lot in the diplomatic world because they are not uttered. It's like a person pulling a weapon and not intending to use it. That just does not happen. That statement was a weapon. And as you continue looking at the policies, getting out of JCPOA, people of Iran saw all of this and say, wait a minute, we had a president, the 44th president of the United States, who was not with us in their eyes, And I don't know the truth. I'm not in President Obama's heart, but people of Iran shouted loudly, are you with us or are you with them?
Yeah, right.
It was proven to them, again, right or wrong, it was proven to them that President Obama was not with them. They saw in contrast actions, not words, actions, not just words, by President Trump that proved to them that President Trump was acting in their best interest. Now, I'm on social media, and people of Iran are very mad at me these days. They're saying, you didn't stand up for President Trump, and you changed your position, and you weren't really supporting him and all that. And what I tell them very simply is, look, the fight between Republicans and Democrats is not my fight. I'm an American. I just want a government that wants the best and does the best for America. That's it. My priority is what is good for America, and I will follow that. Now, what I believe is the fight that I like to be in, and I'm so grateful to both of you for coming to aid us in this fight, is with Islamic Republic in Iran, the biggest sponsor of terror, a tyranny, an ineptitude in Olympian style, a kleptocratic government that has just been awful to the people. And I have to say something about my old boss, President Obama. I don't know if it's true that he said in his book that people of Iran love their government. But I want to look President Obama, my boss, and say, sir, Mr. President, are you kidding me? 1,500 people went to the streets because they were hungry, and they were shot with machine guns. They all mowed down, Mr. President. And you say, if it's true, I don't know, did he say that the people of Iran love their government? If he did, then he's been listening to his own echo chamber a lot, and can't be more distant from the reality of people of Iran. People of Iran want freedom. You mentioned the Institute. The Institute is there to reflect the voices of freedom-seeking people of Iran. Who are the freedom-seeking people of Iran? They reflect the voices of those who utterly and completely renounce the institution of Islamic Republic, its constitution, its affiliation. This is the voice of freedom-seeking people of Iran. And I believe those voices are going to be heard. Those voices are going to, whether they're going to be paid any attention to, I don't know, but they'll be heard. Those voices will be heard in the coming days, coming weeks. And I told people, I said, please don't celebrate with so much joy. We won, we're going to do whatever we want to do. I don't think so. I think people of the United States are going to also raise their voices and saying, enough is enough. Political expediency is not what we voted you into the office. You want to talk, peace. You want to talk different. You want to talk different than President Trump and his administration were talking. Go listen to an article that was written by Len Khodorkovsky, who worked until last week at the State Department. Brilliant thinker, a marketeer, and my old colleague at the transition team on national security, Victoria Coates, who was the director for Iran and who wrote an official position. Beautiful position, very clearer than any other statement that was published on the web pages of the White House. You listen to them. They're saying, okay, why don't you push for a Cyrus Accord? A Cyrus Accord. Make the Islamic Republic of Iran, and it's not their words, it's mine, recognize Israel's right to exist and understand the significance of peace in the Middle East in your own interest. But, the administration has to choose between pleasing a small portion, I would like to say a small portion of the Democratic Party who's had a lot of power and is gaining more, or pay attention to the long-term strategic interests of the United States. Lisa and Michael, I get puzzled when the United States wants to treat its allies and its adversaries the the same way. I get puzzled. I don't understand. They didn't teach me how to look at this, extreme anomaly. How can you treat your allies and your adversaries the same way?
They call
And
it diplomacy.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
No, obviously it's been proven to us that it doesn't work. It makes us weaker, and I for all that we're mad at Twitter and all these social media platforms for silencing many important voices. Bijan, you pointed to the voices of the Iranian people, and we have to at least credit Twitter and social media for giving them a platform in 2009 and introduce them to the world. And they've continued to send their message very loud and clear, but they have to be heard, and their voices need to be echoed. Where are the women's groups?
I recognize that, but I have a little problem thanking Twitter at this time.
I know, so do I. But it's kind of
I recognize that, though. That's a positive.
Right now.
That's a positive. I recognize it. Yeah.
Yes, we have to be diplomatic somehow as well. But
of course.
Switching gears here in terms of that strategy to go forward with the Iran deal, the Biden administration decided to reinstate Palestinian aid, which we know will go for their pay to slay program, which is paying, families of suicide bombers to go ahead and kill innocent people at schools and pizza shops and on buses and in all around the world, particularly in Israel, and to also rescind on the deal to sell fighter jets to the UAE and Saudi Arabia, which was part of the Abraham Accords, which was a very important, innovative deal struck between these Arab states and Israel and the United States. How will this, Michael, tip the balance going forward? How will this affect getting back into an Iran deal? How will this affect the regional allies? And how will it affect the long-term relationship between the United States and the region?
Well, one of the things that I found interesting, as of today, President Biden has not called Benjamin Netanyahu, hasn't asked his opinion or Mohammed bin Salman's opinion or our regional allies what their opinion is on re-entering the Iran deal. If you look at the specific issues that you brought up, the F-35 program and the reinstating financial aid to the Palestinian Authority, one hurts Israel, one puts into question everything that the Abraham Accords have put in place. The other one is something that benefits Tehran when you start holding back U.S. technology and U.S. weapon systems that we can plug into, that we can actually, plug into and be able to work against an adversary in the region. Those things benefit our adversaries. They're not helping our allies. And again, it's the administration that continues to listen to small voices, and they're not listening to American voices on what's best for America. It's the Ilhan Omars, it's the political types that do the whataboutism. Anytime you try to talk about Iran, they immediately tilt to Saudi Arabia. Anytime you try to talk about the Abraham Accords, they immediately tilt to Palestinian Authority, Hamas, but they leave out the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. They leave out groups like that. They don't talk about Assad. They don't talk about Erdogan in Turkey. They talk about Saudi Arabia, and they treat Iran like it's a country that if John Kerry just spoke to it long enough, it would eventually understand what he meant or what he means and change their positions. The hubris of our diplomatic outreach to our adversaries and our diplomatic snubs to our allies, it's insulting to the people that know the region the best. And it makes us look really bad. We're dealing with adversaries that have a consistent strategic policy in the Middle East: Russia, China, Iran, and others. And ours changes every 2 to 4 years. And now we have election interference because our adversaries believe there are election outcomes that favor them. And that's why we have election interference. And our adversaries couldn't be happier. And to make demands of the Biden administration to re-enter the Iran deal, Otherwise, it's war. I don't know if you saw what Trita Parsi said. That if the U.S. doesn't renegotiate and lift sanctions on Iran, then the U.S. will be basically starting a war with Iran. The Islamic Republic of Iran needs the JCPOA more than anybody else does. They're trying to use the playbook where if they make threats in the past, it's led to concessions. And the one thing that I say, I'm from Texas, so forgive me. I know you're tied to the country more than I am, but I serve my country in that region. I basically say that this regime does not own Iran's history. This regime has only been around for 40 years. And this regime has done nothing but destabilize its internal economy, destabilize the region. And it's the first, they finally built the land bridge they wanted to build from Tehran to Beirut and onto, hopefully Jerusalem one day in their eyes. But the land bridge has been occupied by protesters against the regime, against Walayat al-Faqih. They're occupying the land bridge in Iran, in Iraq, in Syria, and Lebanon, and saying no more to the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Right.
And like Bijan says, all we have to do is listen. The problem is our Western media doesn't want to listen.
Right. Well, yeah, it's not just that the Western media. You bring up you brought up Trita Parsi. I didn't want to mention his name ever, but now that you brought it up,
I don't even think the Biden administration is listening to him at this point, but they are.
And I think it's important to talk about their lobby here. It's important to talk about what a platform they have. Talk about the hypocrisy of social media platforms to silence some and give these individuals a platform. Talk about the hypocrisy of people like Trita Parsi and others who lie and manipulate facts in order to push their agenda forward and to do the mullah's dirty work here in Washington. I mean, I know personally, I can't say I've already been targeted. My website and emails have been badly hacked. I'm still getting out of a hack that happened last week.
Right.
It happens constantly. So their tentacles are reaching us right here. After this conversation, we know they're watching us. We know that they're listening. Bijan, can you talk a little bit about the naivete in the American public? And I'm not saying this in a condescending way. I'm saying this in a way where people should wake up and be informed of the level of influence that these individuals have on Washington, on the media, and in controlling the narrative about the Middle East, about Iran, and about the nuclear deal.
Well, what happened in 1979 was that the diplomatic relations between what used to be the imperial government of Iran and the United States, which was a very close one. We had all kinds of cooperative protocols in place. The special forces of then imperial government of Iran were trained right here at Fort Bragg and other places in the United States. Michael knows that background. And greatest relationship, and real ally of the United States in the region. Now, we don't want to go back to the background of that era. We want to say that since 1979, no diplomatic relationship was between the two countries. And, what happens is in an embassy, it usually has two sides. One side of it issues visas and does the work that, the constituents require in administrative procedures. And the other side of the embassy is there to collect information and pass on to their own government. And, every embassy is considered the soil of the representative country. So when that relationship was severed, just put yourself in the position of Islamic Republic. What do? You don't have the ability to have your professionals gather information and pass on to you in any place there. What do? You establish a network. And that network has many tentacles, as you mentioned so correctly. For 40-some years, universities are infested with people who pretend to be academic and scholars, but they're somehow on the payroll. And I'd say that without hesitation, many of them on the payroll of Islamic government. You say how? Well, they don't have to be receiving a wire transfer from a bank here. No, their families could be staying in a nice villa in northern Iran for 2 weeks, all expenses paid. That is something that nobody tracks. No OFAC, no Treasury, no list, and that has been happening. That network has grown and grown and grown to have so many tentacles, and institutions are established under the nonprofit charter, this, that, the other, and people participate in international negotiations, it's like, really, I mean, you don't have to really question it too far. That influence is there. That makes you stop to think. You know, I read somewhere that Ambassador Sherman, when she was at Harvard, she commissioned a few graduate students to do a study on political forgiveness, which is a very interesting read. If you get a hold of it, I recommend you all read it to see, take a glimpse into the thinking of Ambassador Sherman, who, by the way, I believe wants to carry the legacy of bringing back JCPOA exactly it was, the way it was structured, and that would be a terrible thing to do. That would not be good for the United States. But I want to say, you talked about safety of our allies. Let's take Israel. When I stayed at the Sheraton in Tel Aviv, from my balcony, I had a direct view of Mike's Cafe. For those who have studied history, they know what happened there, and they understand why Israel faces an existential threat in that neighborhood. Cannot be minimized. It cannot be dismissed. Paranoid Israelis. No, that is not the issue. Anyone who's looked at that place and understood what happened there, that's just one example of took place. So I'd like to invite Ambassador Sherman, others, Deputy Secretary Sherman now, to pay attention to these realities. Listen to the people of Iran. See what they're looking for. You know, don't lose sight of the fact that if you make a deal with the devil, that is the Islamic Republic in Iran, 4 years from now, other things will happen. You have to pay attention to make alliances with the people of Iran. The United States has a long and very strong history of staying on the side of the people of Iran. Howard Baskerville is a name. Other people who work to eradicate malaria, to mechanize agriculture, to establish banking, to establish modern education. America has a place in the heart of Iranian people. Use it, capture it, leverage it. It's good for the United States. This Islamic Republic, as Michael said correctly, is a 40-year-old juvenile delinquent in a country that has thousands of years of civilization. So please don't base your policies on a 40-some-year-old juvenile delinquent. Base your relationship on understanding the culture, the people, the priorities, best friends of the United States in the years to come. And, I really encourage everyone to go read what Len and Victoria wrote on Cyrus Accord. It's a great, great piece, and I like to see it taken up in any way. But please reveal those 17 documents. We all want to read it. We want to know what happened. Our country entered into agreement. As an American, we have a right to know.
Right. Right. And speaking of reveal, tonight, President Biden was scheduled to give a substantive, we don't know what that means, it's a relative term, foreign policy speech outlining his vision for the next 4 years on U.S. foreign policy. There is a huge snowstorm happening in the D.C. area. Bijan and I wouldn't know about that as we are in Southern California, but you,
Michael knows about it. Michael knows about it.
He knows well.
Just to stay home and light a fire.
We're staying at home anyway here for other reasons, but this brings us to the postponement of the talk, which unfortunately I wanted to actually talk about it here, obviously. What are we expecting him to say, Michael?
I think he's going to say the number one threat to the United States is the climate, and therefore we should get back into the Paris Climate Accord. He's going to talk about ISIS is defeated and we need to work to stabilize the Middle East. And everything that I've heard from a national security perspective has been about the threat of the Trump voter in the United States.
Wow.
And I think it's an unserious foreign policy team.
So, Michael, one moment. I want to really absorb that for our viewers. Basically, you foresee him saying that right now, ISIS is less of a threat than our Trump voters are here domestically.
I served with Lieutenant Clint Watt, who was on MSNBC, and he was a FBI guy for 6 months. And he basically said that if if Trump had said what he said on a foreign land, he would have been droned by the U.S. military. And that kind of rhetoric, that kind of hyperbole is just toxic. And this is somebody that I served in the military with, and they're saying it because their audiences approve of it. He doesn't believe that. He doesn't believe that, but he gets a round of applause on MSNBC for being so brave as to say something that stupid. But anyway, I just have a problem with a foreign policy team that failed at the Iran deal being elevated to take on more capable adversaries like Russia and China. The foreign policy team is Obama's Iran team. That's who it is. They've been elevated to the stage to take on more capable adversaries like Russia and China. And Biden probably won't even mention China. He'll mention Russia as a threat, but won't mention China as a threat. And we have to have a serious foreign policy. This is not partisan, but it's partisan if you criticize a Democrat administration. We have to get back to a foreign policy again, where our adversaries are fearful of both a Democrat president and a Republican president, that they don't feel like there's some sort of favor that they're going to have based on an election outcome. And we are not there. We're nowhere near there.
Right.
Whataboutism in U.S. politics, the whataboutism in U.S. foreign policy doesn't allow us to have serious conversations on actual adversaries.
Right. Right. I mean, it's not in the culture. It's
Lisa,
yes. I was actually
I want to share with you and Michael what I believe the biggest threat to our country is today. The biggest threat, absolutely biggest threat. Biggest threat to our democracy is promotion and advocacy for relativism. Relativism, which I've been told is defined as if I do it, it's okay. You do it, it's not okay, because my situation is different. I can do it, but you can't do it. That is the greatest threat as a philosophy. We must all resist it. Violence is bad. We must reject it, all of us, with all of our strength. We cannot justify violence by anybody. Anybody. No, I'm not going to say there are good people on both sides. No, I'm going to say violence must be denounced, renounced. No violence altogether. This is the greatest threat. We must come together. America must come together, choose understanding and tolerance over revenge and punishment. That is not a sustainable path, and those who promote it will not win. I say this in their interest as well as an American.
One caveat to coming together with different opinions, with freedom of debate, classical argument, classical liberalism. I would think the biggest threat to the United States, I agree with you, is the practice of relativism, but it's also the attack on the First Amendment. If the First Amendment is not upheld, and again, the First Amendment should be protected for everyone. It shouldn't be shelved because you disagree with somebody and then used as a weapon to further your cause. And if the First Amendment falls, all the other amendments go with it, because the only way you can protect the other amendments is by talking about it in a place where you don't get canceled, where you don't get fired, where you don't get called names. And one thing I'd love to do, and I think we're going to be able to do this in 2021, we're going to get rid of the term debunked because it's a ridiculous term. Also the term, that's a conspiracy theory. Basically, anybody who's critically thinking about something is called a conspiracy theorist. And anybody who disagrees with you simply cites an article written by somebody who agrees with them, who's been basically corrupted and no longer trusted by the U.S. Population. I'm talking about the media. I want the classic liberal from Greenwich Village and Haight-Ashbury that says, don't believe what you hear, question authority, instead of the new progressive liberal that will shove a CNN article in my face and say, that's been debunked. So it hasn't been debunked. That's basically a Democrat agreeing with you and publishing on CNN. That's just groupthink. And we got to challenge that. We got to push back, because we cannot tell other countries how to be if we can't use our own country as an example. We're failing. We're failing there. We're starting to let our country be something where our adversaries can say, who are you to tell us how to be? Look at you guys.
Right.
Look what you're doing to your own people.
Yeah, or how about just eradicating cancel culture altogether and growing up and hearing things that you don't agree with or you don't like, and being able to learn and grow from that. With that, I think I'd like to segue into speaking a little bit about. People ask me, what can we do? And speaking of, when we're talking about the First Amendment, we're talking about that freedom of speech that we have. As a journalist personally, and I know both of you work in this capacity as well, we often have the job of echoing for or being the echo for those voices who do not have a platform. And to that end, for over a decade now, we've worked at telling the stories and being the voices of the people in Iran. And Bijan Kian, who is we're very, very honored to have with us, is the president of an organization dedicated to this. This is a very open plug because it's an organization that is solely focused on giving the people of Iran, the genuine, real people of Iran. We're not talking about just the cool kids from Tehran. We're talking about every inch of that country, every voice in that country, a platform, a way of communicating what they want, what they need, how they're feeling, and not paraphrasing for them the way many people in this country do, the way the lobbyists do in Washington. We're not going to say what we think they're feeling or what we think they're thinking, but we're going to actually give them a platform. So, Bijan, I thank you for approaching myself. I am sure Michael feels the same way, to join you on this venture, to allow these voices to have a reverberation and hopefully to have them be heard and not be canceled, so that the people in the United States can understand and really get a feel for what the people of Iran want.
Thank you for giving me that opportunity. Let me just very quickly, in 30 seconds or less, tell you what the Institute that you have so kindly joined and support is not. The Institute is not there to take part in the power formation of a government in Iran. It's not an organization angling for power at all. No such plans. Unlike any other organization, and we respect those who want to do that, but the Institute is not there to do that. The second thing the Institute is not there to do is to compete with organizations. In fact, the Institute is there to support the voices. Unlike this has been another hallmark of the certain minority communities, that there's so much infighting between the people in the community who share the same goal, but constantly beat up on each other. That is not what the Institute is there to do. It's there to support those who agree with that principle, reflecting the voices of freedom-seeking people of Iran, being those who renounce the entirety of the institution of Islamic Republic and its constitution and its affiliated entity. The third column, this is something that the Institute is there to do, is to provide the counter-narrative. The counter-narrative, I'm sorry, with all due respect, when somebody says the people of Iran like their government, we say, no, it's not true. You are not listening to the people of Iran. Counter-narratives, support, reflecting their voices. And I want to thank both of you for joining that fight. And there are many, many who have come, surprisingly. A very large number of people have come to support that view because of those differences. This is not just another organization put together by 5 people who call themselves, give them title. I'm just a volunteer. I am there to serve. I am a servant of a cause. And, I've had enough titles in my life. So I'm a volunteer, just a volunteer. And I'll be happy to work for you and Michael and everyone else.
You are honestly someone we all look up to, and thank you for being the leader on this. I'm sure people will want to know, how can they find out more? How can they join? Is this to be continued, or?
Well, just stay tuned. That's what I would say. Stay tuned, and I think Michael, yourself, others are going to provide those means of connecting with the Institute. But it's important to say that the tip of the arrow is from the people of Iran outside. The Institute is not there to tell Iranian people what to do. They know what to do. They know their rights. They know responsibilities. We simply serve to reflect their voices. They have the social media, but please understand that the government of Islamic Republic has all means of controlling everything and identifying them and hurting them. So they can't say what they want to say, even on social media.
Yeah.
We are there to do that. So if anybody wants to criticize me, why am I not focusing on social media on the problems in my country, the United States of America, and I'm paying attention to their country and what they're doing, because that is our battle. This is not our battle alone. 74 million people have a different idea here, enough representation. I want to focus my fight on fighting the tyranny, the terror, ineptitude, and kleptocracy of Islamic Republic, because I'm reflecting the voices of freedom-seeking people of Iran. And it's been just fantastic to listen to Michael, to listen to you. As always, I'm learning from both of you, and I'm humbled by being on the same panel with you. And I'll come back anytime, Lisa.
Thank
Thank
you
you so much. Michael, thank you very much for all those comments and all the wisdom and all the service, by the way. Thank you for standing in harm's way, facing the pointy end of the spear, so that we can keep our freedoms, Michael.
Yeah, thanks to you both and your service to our country and your wealth of information. Thank you for being on this program. And I invite all of you to learn more about Bijan Kian and Michael Pregent. I will post all of their information, social media, under this video. You can catch the rest of our programs on youtube.com/Lisa Daftari. And we look forward to having you join us next time. Good night.
Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. Good night, Michael.
Good night, both of you.